Hello, therefore here I am writing on something I never would have shared with anyone. My relatives contacted me 10 days ago, following 10 years of no communication. Now 31F, I left them at 21, just following my college graduation. That choice was among the toughest but most important ones I have ever made. It all came down to how they handled me in relation to my identical sister, Rebecca. Rebecca has always been the golden child, 12 minutes older than me, and for some reason my parents behaved like it made all the difference, for as long as I can recall. Rebecca could do no wrong, hence it was always obvious who her favorite was. I, constantly in her shadow, could not do anything wrong either. Most of my youth I was attempting to surpass her, thinking one day people would view me the same way they regarded her. But not one thing I did altered anything. Rebecca stated she was the expert in everything, including art, when I worked hard at school, improved grades, excelled in sports, and even in subjects like art. I drove myself to be better, to be acknowledged, but it appeared to backfire instead. To my parents, it most likely appeared as though I was purposefully attempting to make Rebecca look bad, far from truth. I simply wanted them to adore me exactly as they did her. They didn't, though. Every time Rebecca desired anything, from the newest technology to pricey art lessons, they would provide it to her without thinking twice. I was advised not to seem spoilt when I sought something. The pattern was so clear-cut that by the time we were teenagers, I had ceased seeking very little at all. Rebecca decided she wanted to take a gap year when it came time for college. That year turned out to be 3, and she never really attended any college at all. I worked my tail off, got into a top business school, and even though I needed help paying the tuition, my parents balked. They informed me I would have to apply for student loans as they would not cover me. It ached. I cannot pretend otherwise about it. I didn't argue, though. I kept my distance and suppressed the hurt since I needed the loan to get through college. They were not going to change, it became quite evident. During college I hardly stayed in touch with them, just visiting sometimes for the holidays. I maintained emotional barriers even then. The tipping point arrived right before graduation. Hoping perhaps that they might turn up for me on such a significant day, I invited them to attend the ceremony. But I never heard from anyone. Emails, no calls, no messages. I attempted to follow up with them, call, text, everything, but received nothing in response. I finally realized they wanted no one to arrive. I only discovered the truth from certain relatives after the ceremony. My graduation fell on the same day Rebecca was beginning an art class at a nearby community college. Of course, Rebecca's first day was considerably more significant from the perspective of my parents than my college graduation. They missed my ceremony completely, as they couldn't leave her alone on her first day. That was the instant I realized how little I really meant to them. I had been striving for 21 years to fit into a place in their life that they most definitely did not want me to occupy. They skipped my graduation, but it was the years of favoritism, the emotional neglect, and the ongoing sense of inadequacy. That day I determined I was finished. I had no intention of continuing to pretend we were family. Not nowadays. I blocked them on everything: phone, email, social media. I honestly didn't think they cared enough to seek out anyhow, and I wanted not to hear from them. I even stopped corresponding with Rebecca. Our relationship had never been great. Her behavior had always been superior, as if she were the center of the universe, and my parents simply served to confirm it. Though I knew deep down she was insecure, I lacked the will to cope with her. We had nothing in common, hence, I never felt guilty about excluding her from my life. I then turned entirely inside myself. Having mountain debt and little financial help from my parents, I accepted the first job I could locate. Though not glitzy, it was enough to cover expenses. I had fantastic friends from college who supported me emotionally, and they were my genuine family. I worked my way up over years, finally securing a decent job with a firm that makes vegan goods. After 5 years there, I have established a strong life for myself. I have lately been playing about with the concept of launching a company. Though I am not vegan personally, I have been investigating the vegan industry and learning about the way of life. The sector has great promise, and I have spoken with some investors who would like to work with me. Once everything was set, I intended to leave my employment in a few months, then start my own business. Last week, Though I suddenly got a call. My relatives contacted me after I hadn't spoken to them in 10 years. My dad was nearing death. He had been fighting cancer for 3 years, and I discovered that he now had not much time left. The news landed more strongly than I had anticipated. The thought of my dad dying was difficult even after all that had transpired. Though I had never intended to ever return, I abandoned everything and headed back home. Not ready for what I found when I got to the hospital. My dad was emaciated and sickly and hardly identifiable. My mother was there as well. She hugged me as soon as I arrived. All the rage, pain, and contempt vanished for a fleeting instant. Seeing my father so near the end simply made one feel heavy. Rebecca was also present, although she said hardly to me. She basically sat in the corner, not noticing me. That surprised me not too much. We never got along well, and obviously that hadn't changed throughout the years we had been away. Neither did I try to chat with her. I was absent from her side. 2 days after arrival, my dad died. It ached even though everyone knew it was approaching quickly. Since my mother and Rebecca had previously planned the funeral, everything proceeded quickly. I was back at home, attempting to sort things before I knew it. But the discussion I had with my parents just before my dad passed away truly threw me. Mom and Dad began chatting to me about Rebecca's predicament when she left. At first, I gave it little thought. I thought it was simply idle chat. But they then delivered the bombshell. Rebecca had been grappling. She never returned to school after leaving community college and has been jobless for years. She would resign a few months after starting a job, stating the compensation was insufficient or the work was too demanding. Her parents had been helping her financially all this time, and they worried about what would happen without my dad around. I should look after her for them. What I was listening to astounded me. They were now expecting me to assist my sister, the same sister who had been cuddled and favored her whole life. After everything I had gone through, and after being neglected and abandoned by my own family, I advised them I had personal plans. I was ready to launch my own company and lacked the time or means to handle someone else's issues, never alone someone like Rebecca, who had never demonstrated any inclination toward independence. But my dad insisted on it. He informed me they lacked the wherewithal to continue supporting her, given all the medical costs they had paid for his treatment. My mother wanted me to cover for her approaching retirement. I attempted to object, but Dad was on his deathbed. How may I turn down? With all the feelings running strong at that instant, I promised him I would look out for Rebecca. Though I wanted not to, I was unable to deny his last desire. I felt as though my options were few. To say the least. I felt conflicted after my father died, since deep down I knew I was making a mistake. A part of me remained wounded and enraged over all that had gone between my family and myself over the years. Though it was something I never intended to take on, another side of me felt the weight of the commitment I had given him. Between my own goals and responsibilities for which I had not asked, I felt imprisoned. The funeral was an understated event. By the time I got here, my mother and Rebecca had everything set up. I had little say over how things turned out. It was not what I had in mind. Though I had long ago ceased feeling like one, I was only there to honor my mother and fulfill the obligation of a daughter. I seldom talked, and Rebecca hardly either. Every time we crossed paths, she gave me her typical icy, apathetic glance, and I had no desire to start any discussion. She seemed more dissatisfied with the circumstances than I had anticipated, but I didn't follow up to find out. She wouldn't be open to me. I already knew. And to be the consoling sister most likely expected of me, I was not in the mood. We only really spoke once, after the burial, when I drew her aside. I wanted to discuss Jared, the man she had been seeing long distances. From the beginning, I felt negatively about him. My parents had mentioned him during that hospital visit. I knew the kind. Jared was the kind of man who experimented, cheated on his partners, and treated women like things generally. He had a reputation back in high school, so I had no question that he had not changed at all. Rebecca basically shrugged me off when I cautioned her about him and attempted to explain she should exercise caution. Having been together for 2 years and believing he was the one, she behaved as though she knew him better than anybody. She trusted him entirely. She was going into disaster, although I could see she was passionate about him. But her attitude toward me seemed to be more like I was attempting to indulge her ideas. There was no need in confronting her. Her voice was stern. "Thanks for your concern, but I don't need you to act like a parent," she added. "Just help me financially like you promised. That's all I need from you. I'll handle my life." Those stinging remarks also helped me to clarify things. She objected to my guidance. She wanted no repairs to our relationship. She just gave the money first priority, so that would be how things turned out. Okay, I considered. I would only keep my pledge and nothing more. Thinking maybe things would calm down for a little. I traveled back home following the burial. I still had ideas for my company, but I had a lot to catch up on at work. Still, I felt as though things were not quite finished. The final desire of my father tormented me much, and I felt that looking after Rebecca would be more of a hassle than I had anticipated. 2 days following the funeral. Sure enough, my mother phoned. She insisted on my scheduling Rebecca's flight to see Jared. Her heart fell. They wanted me to cover every tiny expense in Rebecca's life, just what I had worried about. I could clearly see this heading. Should I cave in now, I would be expected to cover everything for her going forward. I agreed and paid for her flight, but because a commitment is only that. I asked for nothing but updates. I neglected to follow the trip to see how it went. I simply wanted to step back from the whole matter. I could not, however, escape it indefinitely. A knock on my door around 1 week later. Not expecting anybody, I was shocked to find Rebecca standing there looking worn out and tear-stained. She had been on a bus for hours to get to me because she didn't want to phone, and I sensed something was rather wrong. She disintegrated the instant I allowed her inside. She described how everything had collapsed when she got to Jared's house through weeping. She had chosen to surprise him by turning up unexpectedly and discovering he was with another female. The reality of the matter really hit her hard. Jared was not the man she had assumed he was. He had the nerve to tell her they weren't exclusive, and she had no right to challenge what he did when she wasn't there. Rebecca was distraught. She had been preparing a future with him after they had been together for 2 years, but all her illusions were dashed in one nasty clash. Furious, she acknowledged that she had swung her duffel bag at him in the heat of the moment, lashing out violently. One of the metal chains on the sack raised his eyebrows and started him to bleed. Not knowing what else to do, terrified, she left the scene. Still, it did not finish there. Jared charged her with assault, and today she was paying a fee she could not afford. She had thus come to me. Desperate and without anywhere else to turn. She was not I meant to be the one looking after her now. I sat there listening to her account and felt the weight of the disaster she had produced. To be honest, I became rather angry. She had been cautioned by me. She had disregarded me when I tried to let her know about Jared. Now, as my parents had cautioned me would have it, she was expecting me to tidy her mess. "You are on your own," I said to her. "You got yourself into this. You need to figure out how to get out of it. I made a promise to help you, but that does not mean I'm going to fix every problem you create." Her eyes wide, as if she couldn't comprehend why I wouldn't simply swoop in and save her. She stared at me in incredulity. She brought back the commitment I promised our father, but I held steady. I had agreed upon something else, not this. I was not her crutch for eternity. The least I could do was schedule her a flight home. I did. After that, she argued not too much, as she knew I wouldn't be changing my position. I assumed her ride to the airport would mark the end of it. Though I had done my share, I was not going to let her pull me down with her poor choices. Naturally, though, it did not end there. Furious with me for not assisting Rebecca more the next day, my mother called. Telling me I had betrayed the vow I had given my father, she charged me with being selfish. She advised me to bring Rebecca under my wing, assist her in turning her life around, and maybe even assign her responsibility in the company I was forming. Still, I knew better. Rebecca deserved to own her life. She did not need a handout or a job. I was not going to be the one to protect her from reality. After that, I blocked my mother. The guilt-tripping and manipulation were intolerable to me at last. They obviously needed something, not because they really cared, so they were just contacting me now. Rebecca had been given years of priority over me, and I wasn't going to be used just because I had at last produced something of myself. I wasn't going to pick up the pieces for Rebecca even if they asked me to. I felt for the first time in a very long time that I was in charge of my life. Rebecca or my mother didn't get back to me for some time following that. Perhaps at last they understood that I would not be performing the expected role. For me, life began to return to normal, or at least what normal had evolved into. I concentrated on my employment and the company I intended to start. I was not going to allow family problems to drive me away from this endeavor. I had great ambitions for it. Meeting with possible investors and outlining the initial actions, I immersed myself into the study and planning stage. Having something entirely of mine felt fantastic. Nobody else could be responsible for it or meddle. Having worked so hard to get here, this company concept was an opportunity for me to show myself that I could thrive on my own initiative. Of course, though, life sent another curveball just when things appeared to be settling. A few weeks after I banned her mother's phone, Rebecca sent me an unannounced SMS. Since honestly I wasn't expecting her to get in touch once again so quickly, I hadn't blocked her. The clear, almost direct statement was, "I paid off the fine. I need your assistance no longer. Mom feels let down and never wants to see you evermore." Before I responded, I gave the message some long-needed attention. How little feeling it set up in me seemed unusual. Perhaps a few years ago, knowing my mother never wanted to see me ever again would have cut close. Right now, though, it did not follow its former pattern after all that had transpired. It seemed more like confirmation, like I had been correct all along to cut off relations when I did. For years, they had not given me any thought. They were only getting in touch now because they needed something. Rebecca sent a very clear message. She was not seeking an apology or an emotional link. She only wanted to let me know she had handled the matter and that, from her perspective, our relationship was essentially commercial. Perfect for me. I had no intention of allowing her to pull me down once more. I answered her SMS not once. Rather, I banned her number as well after my own experience with my mother. Officially, I had returned to where I had begun before the death of my father. No relationship, no communication, no emotional baggage. It seemed like the orderly respite I had been looking for. This time, though, it seemed last. Second chances and remorse hanging on my shoulders would no longer exist. Having done my share, I kept my word, and now I was free. That door closed tightly. Then I went back to my business plans with fresh attention. Things were headed in the correct direction. I understood the market I wanted to enter. I had the appropriate individuals interested, and making something from scratch, something I could control, provided me the vitality I needed to go past the emotional tiredness my family had brought forth. But then, as life sometimes goes, the past has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. Out of the blue. One day, I received a call from one of my college buddies. We hadn't talked in some time, so I assumed it would be only a catch-up conversation. She dropped the bombshell. "I ran into your mom at the grocery store last week." After the customary short conversation, my mother reportedly had been telling everyone who would listen that I had split from the family. She created an image of a self-serving daughter who had turned her back on her impoverished, suffering sister and bereaved mother, therefore implying that I was callous for not intervening. Rebecca was the victim, and I was the cool, unassuming one. The same narrative I had heard my whole life. Though not shocked, I was outraged. From my mother, this was textbook behavior, playing the martyr and bending the narrative to suit her tale. The way she was lying to others who knew less about the whole truth, though, truly troubled me. It was about controlling the way people perceived me. Not only about me anymore. Following the chat with my buddy, I pondered for the rest of the day whether I should approach my mother or let it slide. Part of me wanted to call her out, to at last tell her how much harm she had done over the years, right front. Still another side of me understood, though, that nothing I said would change anything. She would turn my words, as she had always done. I was not going to provide her with the gratification. I let it go then, doing the only logical action that appealed to me. I wasn't going to hunt after people's views. Those who knew me well enough would know the actual narrative. Nobody needed me to prove anything. I kept ahead with my preparations, though. Over the next 2 months, I polished my company plan and contacted more investors. I could sense momentum gathering, and things were moving quicker than I'd anticipated. Seeing something I had labored so hard to come to pass was thrilling. Then Rebecca turned up once more, just as I was ready to make the next major move, resigning and really committing to my own business. This time it was not a phone call or a note. She arrived at my door looking dejected and without warning. Her facial expression suggested that she was really desperate. Though part of me refused to let her inside, curiosity won out. She entered my living room before I could say anything broke down. She informed me through tears how she had been attempting to straighten her life since our previous conversation. She had been working various jobs attempting to pay off the fines from the incident with Jared, but things weren't going as planned. She wanted to learn how to be independent and said she was at last ready to accept accountability for her own life. She then slammed me with the actual reason she had come. "I know you're starting your own company," she added, wiping her eyes. "I would want to join it, as your partner, not as an employee. Not sure what she was asking. I simply watched her. She wanted to enter my company, something I had developed from the ground up, without any knowledge, any expertise, any actual contribution. Deep down, I realized this had nothing to do with wanting to work with me. It was about her desire for someone to carry her while she worked out her life, a safety net. Nor would I be that person. Trying to keep my voice calm. "Rebecca," I whispered, "this isn't going to work. I cannot just bring you in like that. You lack the knowledge or tools to assist me with this. And to be honest, I doubt that is what you truly desire. You simply want a way out of your difficulties, and I am not the one able to solve everything for you. She appeared wounded, perhaps even startled, but I paid no attention. I wasn't going to allow her guilt into this. Not here this time. "You have to work things out on your own," I said. "I can't carry you anymore. I have carried out what I promised. You need to start assuming accountability." Rebecca said not much after that. She departed without creating a disturbance, but the weight of the talk stayed long after she was gone. I had an unusual mix of relief and melancholy, sadness, as I knew this would be my last long-term visit to her. Relief since I had at last maintained my ground and resisted allowing the dysfunction of my family to pull me down anymore. I am done. Done with the promises, done with the guilt, done with the theatrics. I realized then that my life was mine to live and that I was not going to allow anyone else to decide how I proceeded. To be free. Felt fantastic. Things calmed down at last when Rebecca departed. Everything that had happened, the years of neglect, the favoritism, the manipulation, started to weigh less. I felt liberated, released from their emotional games, expectations, and demands. Not having that continuous anxiety chewing at me at first seemed odd, but as the days went by, I enjoyed the peace. I concentrated on my company and gave it all I could to make it run. The momentum I had established was not slowing down. With Rebecca and my family gone from distracting me, I could continue straight forward. I had a few important backers, people who shared my vision and were prepared to support me. At last, being on the brink of something I had long fantasized about felt strange. One turning moment was the day I turned in my resignation. Though I had worked hard to reach my current professional level, this was different. This was creating something of my own, not only about ascending the corporate ladder. Walking out of that workplace for the last time, I felt lighter than I did years ago. All mine, my life, my decisions, my future. Naturally, though, life has a way of surprising you, even if you believe you have everything under control. One day, just as I was getting ready for a meeting with a possible new partner, I received a call from an unidentified number. Thought it may be business related. I paused before responding, but I realized I had made a mistake as soon as I heard the voice on the other end. It was Mother. "Alex," she replied, her voice softer than I could recall. "I have to talk to you." For a minute I said nothing, wondering why she was getting in touch after all this. Particularly after Rebecca's previous visit, I had made it plain that I wanted nothing to do with them, but something in the voice of my mother sounded different. Not the typical guilt-tripping or manipulation, but something more. Perhaps it was weariness, or perhaps even sorrow. Finally, in a firm voice, I added, "I don't know why you're calling." I felt I made it abundantly clear I'm done. She let out a big smile. "I know, and I'm not blaming you. Alex, I have no idea how to remedy this. As I consider all that has transpired, I see now that I made many mistakes. I misled you. We let you down all around. Though I wasn't sure how I should feel about it, it was the closest apology I had ever heard from her. Might I really think Rebecca was sorry? Years of being put aside for her after all that had occurred might mean nothing. Or was this only another effort to get me back into the fold and assign guilt for their mess? Why right now? My voice colder than I had meant, I asked. From me, what do you want? She said fast, I don't want anything. I have nothing specifically asked for. Simply put, I wanted you to know I apologize. Generally for anything. The words hung in the space between us, and for a brief while I had no idea what to say. For years I had fantasized about this day when my mother would at last own the damage she had done. Now that it was here, though, it felt different than what I had anticipated. The apologies do not cover the years of negligence or suffering. It made no difference that they had only ever contacted me in need of anything, I said at last. I'm not sure what you want me to say. You are sorry? Nice. Still, nothing is changed by that. It does not undo the years of treatment like I did not matter. It does not change the fact that you only paid me attention when you required me to assist Rebecca. Her voice breaking, she responded, I know. I am not seeking pardon, I know. I wanted you to hear from me, simply hear. I wanted you to know that today I understood. I had a peculiar variety of feelings, rage, grief, and oddly enough, relief. She had at least admitted the truth, even if her apology might not have been perfect or might not have fixed anything. She had at least at last spoken the words I had been waiting to hear. After a protracted stop, I inhaled deeply. I value the apology, I said, surprised by my own calmness. I am not returning, though, and you must realize this. I've advanced. Right now, I live my own life and am glad. Rebecca or you are no more needed. She uttered a whisper. I understand. I simply hope we will be able to rebuild someday. Alex, I'm missing you. Every one of us does. I kept silent. I struggled to say anything more. A few minutes later, I hung the phone, feeling a weird closure. Though perhaps it wasn't the ending I had in mind, it wasn't the one needed either. Though they came too late, maybe it was sufficient that I had at last heard the words I had longed for. Having that conversation behind me, I went back to my company more deliberately than ever. My business was expanding and picking momentum in unexpected directions. Though daily tasks presented fresh difficulties, they were the kind of challenges I aimed for. From the bottom up, I had created something flourishing. It was mine, totally and entirely. Nothing could take that away from me. I got sporadic letters from my mother over the next few months, but I ignored them. I had said exactly what I needed to. Having made peace with the past, I was not going to let it hold me back going forward. I was glad Rebecca never got in touch again. Fixing whatever broke between us did not appeal to me. Better still, neat, straightforward, and final. My company kept expanding as the year unfolded. I assembled a small staff, broadened our product line, and even began investigating opening a second site. I sensed for the first time in my life that I could shape my future. I wasn't living for anybody else's validation or approval. I was existing for me. And that was sufficient as well. In the life I had created for myself, in my work, I discovered calm. Family, I had discovered the hard way, was not always about blood. It was about the people who respected your boundaries, who supported you for who you were, not what you could do for them. Ultimately, I came to see that I didn't need Rebecca's approval, my mother's pardon, or any other validation. More than enough was what I had discovered. My own strength, my own road forward. I therefore feel calm as I look forward to the future. Though I am not running from my past anymore, I am not letting it define me either. I moved on and am at last free. Right now, this is my life, and I am glad of the person I have evolved into. Story 2. Because of his wife, the cousin neglected his daughter for 16 years. When I intervened on her 18th birthday, they became enraged. Okay, now let's see how this whole mess came to be. I'm 30 years old and my wife is 27. We live on a large farm. We have about 300 acres of property, 3 baths, and 5 bedrooms. Additionally, we installed electricity hookups for campsites. We reasoned that it would be a great place for the entire family to be together and enjoy summertime activities and vacations. We purposefully constructed it that way. Thought it would be convenient to have a single location where the family could go and spend as much time as they pleased. You know how certain folks always seem to have those meeting spots where everyone seems to gravitate? That's our desired outcome. and that worked out perfectly for a time. When summer arrived, the place would be crowded with cousins, uncles, aunts, and other relatives. Children would be playing. Adults would be lounging around the fire pit, and campsites would be parked all over the field. It seemed to be the family's center. Bill, my 56-year-old cousin, is now among that group. He, quote, "'s been here for ages," and he always brings his children. When the visiting family arrived, Alice, his 18-year-old daughter, is his child. She is a former spouse of his. Her mother was a foreigner, had no relatives in this area. Sadly, she died when Alice was just 2 years old. Very harsh material. The problem is that Bill got married again somewhat soon after that. He was with Tanya, who is now 52, 6 months later. They have 3 additional children together. Place of Bill and Tanya, however, it feels like a completely different planet. Everything revolves on their youngest daughter, whom they had jointly, and their 2 eldest kids. Alice. She seemed to be invisible over there. Even though I'm not the sharpest man, I can understand how much they exclude from the story. She seems to simply be there. Together, they engage in a variety of enjoyable activities and travel. Enroll them in a variety of events. She's confined to her house. No extracurriculars, no vacations, nothing at all that costs money. Essentially, she is left on her own. And see, I've seen this child mature. For the past 4 summers, she has spent every summer at our property. I believe it's because Tanya and Bill simply want her out of their lives. They're always talking about how disrespectful she is and how much problems she's got. She may not be flawless, but it's obvious that she's attempting to attract attention. Here's the problem, though. Alice may be somewhat annoying. I will not mince words. She exudes an attitude typical of a teenager, as if nothing matters. Yes, she is really noisy. Many times when she visited us, I would hear tales of her being really angry with her stepmother and yelling like crazy. And occasionally it's about the tiniest issues. She shuts doors, swears a lot, and to be honest, seems like she's always prepared for combat. I mean, this child really is a brat, right? Indeed, she may behave like one, but you need to consider the reasons behind her behavior. From what I've observed, she didn't begin acting out in the same way as her siblings until she learned this. She seems to be a whole different person, while she isn't living with others at home. Teachers and people from our farm, even unidentified people. She strives to fit in, is quiet, and is courteous. However, as soon as she arrives at her house, chaos seems to ensue. I give it a lot of thought. She seems to be 2 separate persons. The Alice she is with her dad and stepmother, and the Alice she is with others outside of her home. It makes sense why she is unhappy. The absurd thing is that they fail to notice it. Bill and Tanya present a picture of their children as being happy. Nonetheless, Alice is invariably the issue. They never consider the possibility that we may be the ones creating this. Nevertheless, they needed her out of their space, so she began working on our farm during the summers. She's not awful at the task, to be honest. She works incredibly hard if she has something to focus on. She, quote, "'s quite good with the animals, and she's picked up specific abilities like fence repair and equipment assistance. She appears content here, perhaps as a diversion from all the drama at home. Her presence didn't bother us. We were genuinely happy that she was experiencing firsthand what it's like to put in a lot of effort and truly be a part of something. Things therefore became a little more intense this summer. I was aware that her 18th birthday would not be easy. Bill had been raving about how he would throw her out the moment she turned 18. He stated it will teach her responsibility, but all I could think was, honestly, buddy, you're just throwing her out without any thought of a strategy or fallback. In that very moment, she is by herself. I'm not sure how somebody is meant to learn accountability from that. Alice seemed worried as we discussed it with her a few times. There was nowhere for her to go. Her father was serious about getting rid of her. We made the decision to take her in if necessary. Since my spouse and I had the space, we reasoned that we should give her an opportunity to stand on her own 2 feet. We may assist her in resolving her issues and even help her acquire a job or a college. At least she deserves that much. We had her over for supper the night before her birthday. She remained silent, simply selected her meal and appeared to be a million miles away. Alice shrugged when my wife tried to ask her about her intentions for after she graduates. She was unaware. Furthermore, how could she? She wasn't exactly positioned for success by her parents. That evening, my spouse and I had a lengthy conversation. We couldn't leave her alone, even though we knew taking her in may lead to problems. It's similar to how you don't just stand by and watch someone drown, and that's exactly how it seemed. As if we had a chance to toss her a life preserver and she was drowning. We thus made the decision to pack her belongings the next morning when we arrived at her house in my vehicle. Alice was taken aback when we arrived early and bright. I believe that although she had been preparing herself for her dad's boot, she hadn't anticipated anybody to truly come through for her. We packed up everything she owned, including gifts from others and items she had purchased herself. Anything Tanya and Bill said wasn't hers. I wasn't going to take. She remained silent the entire time, as if she was scared to think that this was really occurring. At last, she said something as we were leaving. "Regards," says she. It was also the rare type of gratitude that you hear. It was a relief. It was as though someone had finally relieved her of this enormous burden. I just told her that we were happy to have her and didn't say anything else. It seemed like the proper course of action. We were offering her an opportunity to start again, free from the burdens her parents had always placed on her. It's not like we knew everything or had all the answers. Really, we reasoned that why not lend a hand to someone in need if we could? And everything began to shift at that precise instant. Naturally, though, that's when things became tricky. Fine. Thus, when Alice and I settled in, things quickly began to alter. It was all nice at first. She was silent, perhaps attempting to get used to her new surroundings. We got her situated in a guest room. She had her own bathroom, lots of space, and some solitude. It wasn't simply a temporary situation. My wife and I wanted her to feel like it was her home. We assured her that she didn't have to remain for as long as she needed to, and that she didn't have to sort everything out right now. Here's the problem, though. I won't pretend to be an expert in child rearing because I don't have any. In particular, not a teenager. But I was aware enough of her past that I could see she was still burdened by her father and stepmother. It's not like moving to a new place will instantly erase years of feeling excluded and ignored. We so proceeded cautiously. We let her know she could talk about it if she wanted to, but we didn't force her to talk about it or anything. Alice spent the first few days largely by herself. When we needed an additional hand around the farm, she would come down for meals. Apart from that, though, she was rather reserved. I assumed that she was still attempting to make sense of things. Really, you can't blame her. She moves in with her cousin and his wife on a farm 1 minute after being evicted from her home. That's a lot to ask of anyone, much less an 18-year-old who has experienced what she has. But my wife was really understanding about it. She has always had a knack for putting others at ease. She quote, make sure Alice had everything she would need in her room, set out refreshments for her, and even bought her a little TV. It was as though she was telling me, hey, you belong here. And Alice began to warm up, little by little. She started to become a little more open, offered to help out with the animals without our asking, and occasionally even joined us at the dinner table grinning. I wish I could say that from that point on it was all easy sailing, but that's also when Bill and Tanya became aware of what was going on. It wasn't too lengthy. Word gets around quickly in our family, especially in a large home like ours where people are always coming and leaving. They didn't take Alice's visit very well. They must have learned from someone else that she was staying with us. Bill didn't get back to me for a few days after we moved Alice in. Everything was tight from the moment he called me. No, hello and how are you are casual conversations, simply and concisely to the point. How come Alice is supposed to stay with you? He inquired. That tone in his voice suggested that even before I said anything, he was already angry. I refused to tell lies. Yes, she is present. We assumed we'd assist her out because you mentioned she had to go when she reached 18 and had nowhere else to go. He sighed heavily, as though he were irritated. You are aware that doesn't assist her. We were attempting to impart some responsibility to her. That got me thinking, even though I'm not the type of man who gets into disputes over the phone. But I did my best to remain composed. She's gone through a lot, Bill, you know. She wasn't going to benefit from being sent out without a plan. And I'm not suggesting I know more than you. She is a little child. She requires a location where she can rebuild her life. He refused to accept it. You are not responsible for her. I own her. You may believe that you are helping her, but in reality, you are obstructing our efforts to teach her. I could feel my tolerance eroding. Well, Bill, I guess I'm undercutting that if showing her the importance of taking responsibility means abandoning her. But she's welcome and secure here as long as she stays. For a long period, it felt like we were talking to a brick wall as we went back and forth. All he could say was that it was his responsibility to raise her, that we were going too far, and that we didn't know what was best for Alice. I told him, look man, she's here and she's staying as long as she wants. When I finally had enough. I don't know what to tell you if that's causing you any trouble. That was when he hung up, and I knew something ugly was going to happen. As expected, I received calls and SMS from additional family members the next day. Bill and Tanya, it seems, had been informing everyone that we had taken Alice away from them, and that they would not be attending any more family gatherings until she was gone. To be honest, it felt like a smack in the face. It had always been us who hosted everyone and made sure there was space for everyone. And now that we had taken in Alice, all of a sudden, we were the issue. My spouse was furious. She is the type of person who truly cares about making others feel at home. Therefore, it breaks our hearts when individuals act that way against us. It ached. The next to call was Aunt Linda, who made an effort to handle things more tactfully. It's not like they don't recognize the efforts you make on Alice's behalf. Simply put, they think you're intruding where you shouldn't be. Tanya and Bill feel that you are going against their methods, and they have their own. Aunt Linda, I'm not trying to pick fights, but Alice needed us somewhere to go, and we had room. That's what I told her straight. Bill and Tanya believe it's a poor idea, but I'm not going to turn her away. She's family, and we have the room. She sighed, and it was clear she was attempting to strike a compromise. It could be beneficial if Alice remained someplace else, like an apartment or dorm. Tanya and Bill wouldn't think you were picking sides that way. In response, I was at a loss for words. Rather than genuinely considering what was best for Alice, it seemed like everyone was more concerned with maintaining harmony with Bill and Tanya. And I understand. Conflict is disliked by people, but occasionally you have to make a stance. I informed Aunt Linda that Alice may remain here for as long as she desired. And there concluded that exchange of words. The calls and texts didn't stop after that. Some cousins even said they would no longer be bringing their children to visit. There's a saying that the journey isn't worth it if nobody is coming and petrol is so pricey. Everything sounded like an apology. It was obvious that they were taking sides, but we wouldn't back down. One evening, my spouse and I spent hours discussing it, attempting to come up with a solution for everything. Though she was concerned about the conflict in the family, she had no regrets about lending Alice a helping hand, and I didn't either. Ultimately, we both thought that it was worth it if we could provide Alice with a secure environment where she felt like she belonged. Even if it wasn't how certain family members saw it. Conversely, Alice began to notice the change. She wasn't a moron. She was aware of her dad's popularity. Is it because of me that they're not coming around? She questioned me one night. I had no desire to tell her lies. Alice, it's not your fault. Simply said some individuals don't understand it. And it's their fault, not yours. She gave me a nod, and momentarily I noticed the same expression she had on when we picked her up. A mixture of reassurance and doubt. I knew we were on the right track, but I also knew that things would only become tougher from here on out. Fine. Things became really uncomfortable as the family turmoil began. Even though we continued to have our regular dinners and gatherings, the home didn't feel nearly as full as it usually did. Rather, it felt deserted. A portion of the family just stopped attending. It was clear from those who did turn up that they were trapped in the middle. There was a lot of murmuring and hesitant looks at Alice, as if they were attempting to decide if it was worth the hassle. Alice counted too. Even if she didn't say much about it, you could tell that she would choose that cuisine for supper, remain silent, and project an air of nervousness. She appeared as though she was waiting for someone to make a statement, or perhaps even ask her to go. But my spouse and I made sure she was aware that this was not the case. However, we had an event for my uncle's birthday scheduled for one day. This is the type of occasion where the entire family would typically attend. We would arrange tables beside the fire pit with children playing nearby. It was one of those major events that everyone anticipated. However, this time, last-minute cancellations were more common. When cousin Lisa contacted, she stated her children wouldn't be making it because they were unwell. Aunt Linda reported feeling unwell, while Uncle Tom mentioned something about the workload being very hectic. Everyone seemed to have an excuse all of a sudden. I was aware of this better. They weren't missing classes out of need. Alice was the reason behind their absence. It infuriated me. My wife noticed it in my face, but I didn't want to say anything to Alice. She just sent me the look that screamed, "Don't do this in front of her." So I tried to seem like everything was all right and kept my lips shut. When the day finally arrived, very few individuals were present. We managed to get by grilling some food and starting a small fire, but the stress was still evident. Everyone was being cautious. When Bill and Tanya arrived at one point, I realized something was going to go wrong right away. They hadn't visited the farm since Alice moved in, and judging by Tanya's way of staring at her, I knew this visit wouldn't be cordial. Tanya wasted no time in getting to know Bill despite his initial attempt to act casual while chatting with some of the family members who were present. I was flipping burgers when she approached me and got right to it. "It's not helping anyone, you know." With her arms crossed and a taut expression on her face, she spoke. I played dumb, but I knew exactly what she was talking about. "By what do you mean?" She scowled as if she were speaking to a small child. "Alice, are you keeping her in this place? She is not benefiting from it, and it's the reason behind the family's problems." I put down the spatula and gave her a direct look. "Tanya, we're providing her with a place to stay because, well, she needs it." She responded, "Well, Bill and I think it's time she moves on." Not even making an effort to mask her annoyance. She is now 18. She must learn how to support herself alone. I felt the temperature increasing. She didn't get it from the grill stand alone either. You guys ejected her without providing a safety net. She is not being taught independence by that. That would be giving up on her now. Several persons in the vicinity were silent, obviously keeping an ear out. While Alice was off assisting my wife with some setup at the barn, I noticed several family members interacting. They appeared to be getting ready for whatever was about to happen in front of them. With a lowered voice as though to warn me, Tanya drew in closer. "Bill, furthermore, I find it offensive that you are interfering with our family's business. I had no intention of giving in. Maybe I wouldn't have to if you had always treated her like family. And that was all." She stormed away, mumbling something about how obstinate I was and how we would regret it, and threw up her hands. After a little while, Bill approached me. He seemed unhappy. "We're not attempting to be the evil guys here, you know." Glancing around to be sure no one else could hear, he said, "However, Alice must go on. It's not fostering her growth." Trying not to lose my temper, I took a deep breath. "Bill, if that is truly your belief, then tell me, why didn't you assist her earlier? Why did you not get rid of her till she was 18? He moved uneasily as if he had no suitable response to it. "It's not really that easy," I gave a head shake. "In my opinion, it is. She's staying here till she's ready to go on. Story ends here." He remained silent after that. Just looked at me like I was a traitor or something. Then he turned to go. It remained tense the remainder of the night. Although they made an effort to be normal, it was clear that the entire incident had soured the mood. Tanya and Bill departed early, and several others shortly after. Upon their departure, my spouse drew me aside. She responded, "You made the correct decision. Keep your distance from them if they try to put you in the wrong." I nodded, but I still felt as like I was in the middle of something that I was unable to resolve. The worst part was that Alice could sense a problem. After the most of the attendees had left and we were tidying up. "Did I cause them to depart?" she questioned. She thought she was the reason behind all of this drama, which I detested. "Alice, it's not your fault. When something doesn't go their way, there are those that just can't take it." After that, she said very little more. Just returned to assist with cleanup. However, I could see she was considering it. Her expression conveyed that she was feeling bad about something that wasn't even her fault. The days that followed were peaceful. While Alice was occupied on the farm, we made an effort to maintain the status quo. But this was far from finished, I realized. Family members began contacting us more frequently via messages and phone calls to discuss the circumstances. Everybody seemed to have an opinion about what we were doing, saying things like, "We just want to make sure Alice is okay." Several of them attempted to be kind about it. However, I understood their true meaning. They wanted us to get rid of her so they could resume acting as though nothing was wrong. After yet another round of calls, my wife and Alice and I sat down one evening. It was probably time. We all discussed the current situation. I realize this is a lot, Alice, and I know it's unfair that people are putting the blame on you. Listen to what I said. Her hands fumbled in her lap as she cast a downward glance. Maybe everything would be the same if I wasn't here. I gave a head shake. No comma. It's not your fault. It's they who are adding complexity to it. All of it is not a concern for you. My spouse also stepped in. Alice, we want you here. You now live here, as long as it's necessary. Alice nodded somewhat, but I could still see uncertainty in her eyes. I didn't hold her accountable. Following what she had experienced, it was understandable why she was difficult to trust, but we were going to prove to her that she was secure in our care. The calls persisted over the next few days, and I realized that this was only the start of the family turmoil. But I was certain that we wouldn't give up, regardless of how many times the phone rang or how much family members attempted to coerce us. We were determined to support Alice and stay with her, even if it meant defying half the family. Thus, following the uncomfortable family meal and Bill's several texts, on the farm, tensions began to build. Alice continued to assist and made an effort to maintain her cheerful attitude. However, I could see she was becoming tired of the whole thing. We were trying our best to maintain normalcy with my wife. However, it might be difficult to avoid family turmoil when your phone is continuously vibrating with it. Then one day, Uncle Tom, one of my uncles, paid us an unexpected visit. Uncle Tom has always been the kind to keep his head down and avoid getting involved in family matters. He has never chosen a side or caused controversy. He arrived at the property without warning, so I assumed that something significant was happening. I ushered him inside and we took a seat at the kitchen table while my spouse was preparing coffee. He gave off the impression that he wasn't enjoying himself right away. He moved in his chair as though he was anxious. I also realized that this would not be a productive conversation. I have been conversing with Tanya and Bill. He began massaging the nape of his neck. They're not too happy with the entire Alice scenario. I exhaled. Yes, I have heard it previously. What's the most recent? They're talking about including the family as much as everyone else, he remarked after he paused a while. In essence, they want to decide what should happen with Alice by holding a meeting and doing a family intervention. My jaw went tense. A family gathering to decide Alice's future. Tom, she's not some volunteer project. I know her personally. He spoke fast. I told them so. But they are certain that she must return with them, and they believe that if enough family pressure builds up, you would reconsider. It was like to a blow to the abdomen. Private disagreements between Bill and Tanya and the rest of the family were one thing. That was a record low. What now? On whether she stays or not, they want to put it to a vote. Tom gave a shrug, or something like. They believe that if enough people support them, it would appear as though you have no other option. After listening in silence for a while, my wife eventually spoke out. That is absurd. It's not a democracy here. Alice must remain, so she is staying. Furthermore, we won't throw her out because other individuals find it offensive. Tom nodded, but his expression was awkward. I'm simply the messenger here, you see. However, they mean business on this. Next week, they intend to hold this gathering at Linda's place. Things were beginning to make sense. This was no longer merely a quarrel. They attempted to turn our family as a whole against us. My hands clenched into fists beneath the table. They believe that by uniting against us, they can force us to back down. Seeming to want to soothe me, he raised his hands. Not that I think it's right. I only wanted to let you know that something interesting is about to happen. My spouse and I looked at each other. Although we had been attempting to prevent more confrontation, it was obvious that this would no longer be possible. They were treating this as a family problem, and we would have to choose between resisting their advances and giving in to their pressure. We sat there for a long, trying to decide what to do next, after Uncle Tom went. My spouse proposed that we get in touch with some of our relatives who had offered encouragement, only to see if they would support us. It was not a question of preference. Making Alice aware that she wasn't alone was the main goal. So we started contacting folks throughout the course of the following several days. We referred to Lisa as a relative who had supported us from the start. When she learned of the impending family gathering, she became enraged. She remarked, "That's absurd. They are behaving as though Alice is an issue that has to be resolved. They understand that she would be happier with you." We also gave several uncles and aunts who had previously been undecided a call. While a number of them thought that what Bill and Tanya were doing was inappropriate, others were reluctant to speak up. They made a commitment to visit Aunt Linda's home and advocate for Alice if things were unpleasant. While Alice tried to seem as though nothing was wrong, I could tell that the thought of this family intervention was starting to bother her. She eventually brought it up one evening when we were out feeding the animals. "Is it accurate to say that they are meeting because of me?" her voice inquired. Calm. I gave a nod. "Yes, it is true, but we will not allow them to force you to do anything against your will." Glancing down at her boots, she kicked at the soil. "I just don't see why they're so intent on forcing me to go. When I lived there, they didn't want me." I touched her shoulder with my hand. "Alice, it's not about you. It has to do with their desire to be in charge of things. That is disliked by them. They disagree with the decision we made." She let out a sigh. "I do not wish to add to the existing issues." "You don't cause the issue," I stated strongly. "Indeed they are, and no matter what, you can count on our support." The day of the alleged intervention arrived the next week. Even if we didn't want to, we knew we had to be there. It's likely that they would interpret our absence as a concession. Hence, we hopped in the vehicle and drove to Aunt Linda's house. There was a lot of anxiety when we first entered. There was almost the whole family present. Uncles, aunts, cousins, everyone. Sitting at the head of the table, looking like they were in command of a major meeting, were Bill and Tanya. Alice remained near my wife, obviously uneasy. A couple of the family who had pledged to support us were looking at me worriedly. Bill got up and pretended to be serious. "I'd want to thank everyone for attending. Our conversation here is about what's best for Alice." I rolled my eyes. "Which is better, what's best for Alice or for you?" Tanya leapt to the rescue. "This is not our problem. Making ensuring Alice has a secure future is the goal, and we believe that entails returning home." My spouse folded her arms. "Do you mean returning to the house she was ejected from?" Bill disregarded it and began discussing the need for the family to come together and how this separation was causing everyone to fall apart. All of it was merely a series of statements meant to give the impression that they were the victims. A couple of our relatives raised their hands, but it was obvious that Bill and Tanya had won over the majority of them to their cause, right as things were getting hot. Lisa got to her feet. "This is absurd," she stated steadily. "Alice resides somewhere. She is doing well, feeling protected and loved. You would be helping her if you genuinely cared about her. Not attempting to compel her to enter a scenario against her will." Some others nodded, but the majority said nothing. It was obvious that this would be a difficult struggle. Bill persisted in his efforts, discussing how Alice was becoming reliant on us and becoming isolated by us. He was speaking so confidently that some people seemed to believe him even though it was all gibberish. I quote, "D finally had enough. This isn't a democracy," I murmured as I got to my feet. "Alice has made her decision as an adult. That's not for discussion here. You should deal with it if you don't like it." After a protracted period of stillness, individuals began to leave the room one by one. Some supported us with nods. Others said nothing. As they passed, Bill stayed where he was and Tanya glared at us. Bill remarked, "We're not done with this," as we started to walk away. "Yes, indeed we are," I fired back. After we departed, Alice appeared relieved for the first time in several weeks as we drove home. She knew we had her back, even if we knew it wasn't done yet. The family resolved to make no compromises. Fine. As Alice's university lectures were about to begin, it appeared like things might finally start to calm down. She felt as though she was finding her rhythm after putting in a lot of effort and finishing tasks around the farm. My spouse and I attempted to maintain an optimistic attitude, reasoning that perhaps when Alice began her lessons, the family strife will lessen somewhat. We reasoned that perhaps Tanya and Bill would back off if she was in a good place and had a routine, and just when we felt like we could finally relax, something happened. My cell phone rang. It was Bill. A small part of me hoped that perhaps, just possibly, he was phoning to find a middle ground, even though I knew I shouldn't have responded. Perhaps he had recognized how anxious Alice was about the whole event and was prepared to resolve the situation. I ought to have been more aware. I said in a neutral tone, "Hey man." He made no attempt to say hello. "Alice is reportedly receiving treatment." With a chilly voice he said, "Yes, indeed she is," I answered, sensing the tension building immediately. She experienced a great deal. She requires a conversation partner. I'm not sure why you believe it is necessary, though. He lost his temper. We did a good job raising her. She doesn't require counseling. It seemed unbelievable to me. She was ejected from her house, Bill. She needs help as she has been juggling a lot of issues. Encouragement? He sneered. Or are you only encouraging her actions by leading her to believe that she is a victim? For me, it was it. It was difficult, but I tried to remain composed. I'm not putting any fuel into this, Bill. She has an opportunity to go forward and receive some assistance. Perhaps you're contributing to the issue if you're unable to recognize that. Stillness. Through the phone, I could practically hear him gritting his teeth. You are aware that you have changed, You used to value family. You're only sowing discord now. That sentence struck a chord. Family has always meant a lot to me. I created the entire space with my wife so that we could all get together for family get-togethers. And now he was behaving as though I was the one destroying everything. I was not going to back down, even if it felt like a slap in the face. I'm acting in what I believe to be right, Bill. You're not required to concur with it. Alice, nevertheless, is welcome to this place. It's not that we're sending her away because it will cause you discomfort. I sat there for a minute, trying to gather my thoughts after he hung up. We had the impression that everything we had worked so hard to establish for Alice was being turned against us. I felt exhausted most of all, yet I was angry. It seemed as though someone would always find a way to turn everything we accomplished into something bad. I sat down with my wife later that night to discuss it. We were aware that everything would change when Alice began her lessons. She would follow her own schedule and perhaps, just possibly, the family would ease up once they saw she was coping well. In order to let Alice know that we were proud of her and that she had a support system here, my wife proposed that we have one last small get-together before her lessons started. So we prepared a small dinner, invited a few close family members, just the ones who had been supportive, and set it up to be more of a private celebration for Alice. Even if there were family members who didn't feel the same way, we didn't want her to feel alone. Everything was going well the night of the dinner. Along with several aunts and uncles, a number of my cousins also made an appearance. It was pleasant, and briefly brought back memories of the past. Alice appeared content as she laughed and conversed with everyone. It seemed like we could actually enjoy a drama-free average night for once. Naturally, though, that didn't last very long. Bill's automobile pulled into the driveway as we were wrapping up our supper. I could tell from the start that this would not be a cordial visit. It felt unlucky for him to be back at the farm now that the entire thing had begun. Tanya was with him when he stepped out of the vehicle. The anxiety in the air was palpable as they approached the house. Alice fell silent as some of my cousins exchanged tense glances. The moment she spotted them, her smile vanished. I looked at my wife and knew she was thinking the same thing. There was no way this would end good. Bill wasted no time at all. He approached us directly and stated, "We need to talk now," while everyone looked on. I tried to maintain composure and keep things polite. "Okay, let's move aside and have a private conversation." He gave a headshake. "No, this is what we're doing in front of everyone." Tanya appeared prepared for a fight as she stood next to him with her arms crossed. I sent a quick glance Alice's way, who was observing with a terrified expression on her face. She seemed to be bracing herself for the worst, and to be honest, so did I. However, I wasn't going to allow Bill to cause a commotion in front of everyone. "All right." With my arms crossed, I spoke. "What is the purpose of this?" Bill inhaled deeply as if he were about to give a speech. "After careful consideration, we believe that Alice should return home." The room fell quiet. A few bewildered folks were glancing about as I could see. Alice was stunned, and it was evident that she was at a loss for words. After all this time, I was as astonished as she was. They want her return at this point. With a nod, Tanya moved ahead. We believe it would be best if she returned to live with us. As a family, we want to make things right. Alice remained silent, gazing at her dish. My spouse placed her hand on her shoulder and gave her a comforting squeeze. I had no idea what Bill and Tanya were up to, but I wasn't going to allow them to intimidate Alice into returning. Bill, she's staying here. We've previously gone through this. Bill became stern-faced. She is no longer welcome here. She should be here with us. At last, Alice said something. She spoke quietly, yet steadily. I have no desire to return. She raised her head and made her first eye contact with her father. The only reason you want me back now is so you won't seem foolish in front of the family. Tanya, expression contorted with rage. How could you speak to us in such a manner? Alice refused to give up. You expelled me. You were indifferent to my whereabouts or my fate. You appear here now, behaving as though nothing is wrong. Though it was difficult to interpret his face, I could tell Bill was growing impatient. Alice, were they your family? You are unable to just flee from that. With a forceful yet calm voice, my wife got up. She is not fleeing from any situation. We're behind her as she makes an effort to start over. Tanya furrowed her brow. Oh, so this is the reason the family is split up. You two now believe you are her rescuers, since you persist in meddling. I had had enough meddling. You ejected her. Family is meant to provide for one another. Therefore, we provided her a place to stay. Bill shook his head and surveyed the group as if attempting to get encouragement. This is not the intended state of affairs. Alice belongs with us, so please quit trying to undermine that. My hands began to tighten into fists, but I forced myself to remain composed. This is where Alice is going to stay. No changes. Bill appeared to be ready to argue, but suddenly something changed. He only looked at me for a brief second before turning to face Alice. All right, remain in this place. Don't expect us to try again, though. That's over and done with. He pivoted and moved on, Tanya trailing in his wake. I could tell that everyone in the room was still absorbing what had just transpired because of the intense stillness. I could see Alice's tears welling up in her eyes as she just sat there looking at her plate. We didn't press her to bring it up, my wife and I. We simply sat with her and let her know that we would always be there for her. Although the conclusion wasn't what we had hoped for, at least she now understood who truly stood by her side.